Every time an African entrepreneur uses a cloud application, every time an African student uploads a video, every time an African trader processes a mobile money payment, that data leaves Africa. It travels to a server in Europe or North America to be processed, stored and returned. Sometimes in milliseconds, sometimes not. Africa has over 900 million smartphone users. Africa generates enormous volumes of data every single day. And Africa currently hosts less than 1% of the infrastructure that handles any of it. That is not a technical footnote. It is the most consequential economic infrastructure gap in Africa's digital future. And the deadline has just been put on how long we have to fix it. Here is the question sitting quietly behind every AFC-FTA meeting, every national digital economy strategy, and every conversation about Africa's AI ambitions. We are building digital economies. We are generating the data. We are digitizing our governments, our health systems, our payment rails. Where exactly is all of that running? For most African countries, the honest answer to that question is somewhere else. In a server rack in Frankfurt, in a cloud region in Virginia, in infrastructure that African governments cannot inspect, cannot regulate in practice, and cannot guarantee will be available if a bilateral relationship sours or a geopolitical tension escalates. Data centers are not a niche technical topic. They are the factories of the digital economy. And right now, Africa is building a digital economy without enough factories to run it. So what does the specific gap actually look like? In numbers, in geography, and in consequence. Let me take you through it. Key point 1, the gap in precise, verified numbers. The Africa Data Center Association's 2026 economic report, the most comprehensive independent assessment of Africa's data infrastructure to date, puts the current state in precise terms. Africa has approximately 220 to 230 operational data centers spread across 38 countries. Active capacity stands at 360 megawatts. Another 238 megawatts is under construction. A further 656 megawatts is in the planning pipeline. In total, that adds up to just 0.6% of the world's data center capacity. By comparison, the United States alone hosts roughly 45% of global data centers. Africa, with 25% of the world's population and some of the world's fastest growing digital economies, runs on a fraction of a percent of the infrastructure that makes those economies function. The AFC-FTA Secretariat's own research puts the future requirement at over 700 data centers by 2035, a figure stated directly by AFC-FTA Secretary General Wamkele Mene at both the Digital Trade Forum in Lagos and GITEX Africa in Morocco this year. The Africa Data Centers Association independently corroborates the number, estimating that the continent requires at least 1,000 megawatts of new capacity across 700 facilities to meet projected demand. And the ADCA chairperson, Faith Waitaka, put the strategic stakes in the sharpest possible terms. This is not a catch-up cycle. It is a race to avoid deeper structural marginalization in global compute. Key point 2. The concentration problem makes the gap worse. The headline gap, 700 needed, around 228 existing, is actually understated once you look at where those existing facilities are located. Africa's data center capacity is overwhelmingly concentrated in 3 markets: South Africa, which anchors Southern African cloud services, Nigeria, which drives West African digital infrastructure through Lagos, and Kenya, which serves as the critical interconnection hub for East Africa. Outside this triad, infrastructure growth decelerates sharply. That means the vast majority of African countries, 35 or more of the continent's 54 nations, have either no meaningful data center presence or facilities too small and too underpowered to support serious enterprise, government or AI workloads. A fintech operating in Zambia, a government ministry in Malawi, a health platform in Niger, all of them routing their most sensitive data through infrastructure in a neighboring country, or, more likely, outside Africa entirely. And here is the critical additional constraint. Even if all of Africa's currently announced and planned data center projects are built on schedule, which project timelines across the continent suggest is optimistic, the ADCA report notes that Africa is projected to maintain, not increase, its global share of compute capacity. The global hyperscale expansion is accelerating faster than Africa's build-out. Standing still while the world runs is not a neutral outcome. Key point 3. The energy dependency is a bottleneck inside the bottleneck. There is a constraint within the constraint that does not get enough attention. Data centers are extraordinarily energy intensive. Global electricity consumption by data centers is projected to exceed 800 terawatt hours by 2026, up from 460 in 2022. Generative AI and machine learning applications consume up to 10 times more energy than traditional searches. And Africa's power infrastructure in most markets outside South Africa and Egypt is simply not built to support hyperscale data center operations at the required reliability and scale. This is why Mene was specific in Lagos. We need governments to invest in power generation because these data centers consume a lot of power. So it has to be both public and private sector. The energy dependency is not a secondary problem to be solved after the data centers are built. It is a prerequisite that has to be solved before the data centers can be built at scale. And it means that a purely private sector solution to Africa's data center gap will always be partial, because private capital will continue to concentrate in the 3 markets with the most reliable power supply. So given the size of the gap, the concentration problem and the energy bottleneck, what does solving this actually require? Here's the strategic reframe I want every policymaker, investor and digital economy professional watching this to hold on to. Data centers are not an infrastructure story. They are a sovereignty story. The question of where Africa's data lives, who processes it, and whose laws govern it is the same question that runs through every conversation in this channel. About data embassies, about backbone routing, about satellite licensing, about AI governance. They are all expressions of the same underlying tension. A continent building an ambitious digital future on infrastructure it largely does not own, in a legal environment it does not control, through a commercial architecture that was not designed with African interests as the primary consideration. The 700 data center target is the physical, concrete expression of what digital sovereignty actually requires. Not in a policy paper, not in a communiqué. In megawatts, in facilities, in power supply, in the specific number of server racks that sit inside African borders and therefore inside African law. That is the target. And the ADCA chairperson's warning should be taken seriously. This is not a catch-up cycle. The window to avoid deeper structural marginalization is open. It will not stay open indefinitely. So here are 5 things that must happen to close the gap before that window closes. 1. Classify data centers as critical national infrastructure and fund them accordingly. Every African government with a national digital economy strategy should have a specific, funded, time-bound data center development target embedded in it. Not as an aspiration, but as a capital expenditure commitment with named milestones and public accountability. 2. Solve the energy problem first, not after. No data center strategy that does not begin with a power supply solution will deliver at scale outside the 3 established markets. Governments need to fast-track renewable energy agreements that can reliably power data center operations. Solar, wind, and hybrid solutions are already being deployed by telecoms operators. The same model applies here. 3. Use the AFCFTA Digital Trade Protocol as a data localization lever. The protocol requires data infrastructure to underpin cross-border digital commerce. African governments should be using the implementation negotiations of the protocol to embed minimum data center capacity requirements and data localization provisions for digital trade platforms operating on the continent. 4. Coordinate continental and regional data center development at the Smart Africa and at the regional economic community level. A data center in Lagos cannot serve West Africa if the interconnection infrastructure connecting it to Abidjan, Dakar and Accra does not exist at sufficient capacity. The Smart Africa and the regional economic communities such as ECOWAS, EAC, SADC, CIMAC should be coordinating data infrastructure investment across the continent and in the various regions. 5. Engage development finance institutions now, not when the crisis is visible. The African Development Bank, the World Bank's IFC, the European Investment Bank, and bilateral development finance institutions are the most natural sources of patient capital for the public utilities, power, land, connectivity, that underpin data center development. Those conversations need to happen at the scale of the gap, not incrementally. Conclusion. In the industrial era, a country that did not build its own factories depended on someone else to manufacture the goods its citizens needed. It exported raw materials and imported finished products at a persistent structural disadvantage. The digital economy works the same way. Africa exports data. Someone else's servers manufacture the value from it. And Africa imports the digital services those servers produce at prices set by infrastructure it does not own. 700 data centers is the number that changes that equation. It is ambitious, it is achievable, and according to the people closest to the infrastructure data, it is the minimum required to avoid a structural marginalization in global compute that would be very difficult to reverse. If this gave you a sharper picture of the gap, share it with one person who is making infrastructure investment or policy decisions. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video, which is showing on your screen now.